A lot of people might look at it and think, okay, well then if the first portion, for example, is more beneficial at inducing hypertrophy, then I'll just do the first portion. But that shouldn't be the case.
And during these exercises, they would have EMG readings taken off of their biceps, which would give them an idea of muscle activation.
Most people are not training their biceps correctly. This common mistake leads to minimal muscle growth and wasted effort.
What is up, I'm Lockie, and in this video we're going to dive into the science of building bigger biceps. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how to grow your biceps in size and strength through science-backed workouts. So let's get to it. A well-structured bicep workout isn't just about lifting weights. It's about using techniques and exercises effectively to better isolate the muscle. So we're going to go through the best bicep exercises backed by scientific research to get the most out of your workouts.
Understanding the anatomy and function of your biceps can help you make better decisions in your training. So let's get into the details.
One of the biggest challenges when training your biceps is overcoming common misconceptions and ineffective exercises that can actually hinder your progress. For example, lots of people think that the heavier weight you use, regardless of form, will yield better results, and that's just not the case. Because this often leads to minimal muscle gain and an increased risk of injury.
So let's break down these misconceptions and see what science has to say.
To get the best results, it's essential to look at what scientific studies say about bicep training. So I've looked at the most recent and reliable studies to see what they say.
Jumping right into the first study by Costa in 2021. If you don't know what non-homogeneous hypertrophy is, don't worry about it. We basically want to know, does doing different exercises across a period of time induce more or less hypertrophy? So in this study they had two groups that were randomly selected and they were both given 9-week training plans, except in group A they were given the same exercises to complete 3 times a week for 9 weeks, and then group B were given the same exercises to complete 3 times a week for 3 weeks, and then it was changed to 3 different exercises for another 3 weeks, and then the same again for the last 3 weeks.
Let me know what group you think got bigger in the comments, but the group that got the most hypertrophic benefit was actually group B, the group that changed their exercises throughout the 9 weeks.
That means now we know you should actually be changing the exercises you're doing within your workouts. Maybe not necessarily as frequently as this study did, but definitely be switching up your exercises every 1 to 2 months. Cracking on to the next study, this is a systematic review of the effects of different resistance training volumes on muscle hypertrophy by Baz Val in 2022. Sorry if I mispronounced that. So this study is basically a compilation of all other studies that examine the effect of different sets per week on muscle hypertrophy. So this will give us a good idea of how many sets you should be completing per week to train your biceps effectively. I've put this text up because it is the full abstract, but basically, as you can see, it comprises of over 2,000 studies. So this is a very important one to look at because it will take lots and lots of studies that also meet the inclusion criteria, meaning the results will be very, very reliable. The resultant hypertrophic increase from each of these studies were then categorized into 3 groups of weekly set volumes, with each square representing the sets completed per week. So the results of this study are quite finicky because they do make a general conclusion saying that between 12 and 20 sets is what is recommended for your weekly set volume. However, if you look into the details of this study, you can see that for biceps in particular, the moderate and the high weekly set volume group had no significant difference in hypertrophic gain, meaning both of them groups experienced the same amount of hypertrophic increase between the two. So now that means not only should you be regularly switching up your exercises every 1 to 2 months, you should also be doing a minimum of 12 sets per muscle group per week. So that means if you train one muscle twice a week, you have to do at least 6 working sets per session. So the next study is investigating which portion of the range of motion during a bicep curl, or as they call it an arm curl, is more beneficial in inducing hypertrophy. And I wouldn't take this title at face value because a lot of people might look at it and think, okay, well then if the first portion, for example, is more beneficial at inducing hypertrophy, then I'll just do the first portion of the range of motion for all of my bicep curl exercises. But that shouldn't be the case. You should look at this and take the results as a way to find out what portion of the range of motion is more important, and then alter your training or keep your training in a way that allows that portion of the range of motion to be most accentuated or focused on.
So in this study, all the participants would complete the same protocol, and that protocol was on one arm, you would only do the bottom 90 degrees of a bicep curl, and the other arm, you would only complete the top 90 degrees of a bicep curl. And this study found that it was actually the bottom portion of the range of motion that induced higher levels of hypertrophy.
So now we know you should be changing the exercises you're doing for your biceps every 1 to 2 months. We also know you should be doing at least 12 working sets for your biceps every week. And we now know that the most important range of motion portion for the biceps is the lower portion, but you should not neglect the upper portion. You should just use this knowledge to better enhance your reps when training your biceps. Moving on to the next study, this one is about the shoulder positioning whilst you're doing a bicep curl movement. The position of your shoulder during a bicep curl can dramatically change how a bicep curl movement feels, and in doing that it creates a lot of bicep curl variations.
So this study tested the impact of shoulder angles on bicep activation by using 3 groups. One group would do bicep exercises with their shoulder in a state of extension. Another group would do bicep exercises in a neutral shoulder position. And the third and final group would do bicep exercises in shoulder flexion. And during these exercises, they would have EMG readings taken off of their biceps, which would give them an idea of muscle activation. And the results of this study are pretty simple. The incline dumbbell curl and the standing neutral dumbbell curl resulted in considerable neuromuscular effort throughout the whole elbow range of motion, with the incline dumbbell curl having slightly higher EMG readings, which is potentially due to the nature of the extreme stretch that the incline dumbbell curl has. You have to take EMG readings in relation to hypertrophy with a pinch of salt, so don't completely neglect preacher curls because they still are a great exercise for a stretch and growth in general, but maybe focus on the incline variations the most.
Let's jump into the 5th and final study before we put all of this to the test in my very own workout. So the final study, and quite possibly the most important one, examines the influence of resistance training proximity to failure on muscle hypertrophy, and this is a systematic review with a meta-analysis, which again means the reliability of this study is very high. So as this is a meta-analysis, that means it analysed the results from other studies that took into account reps in reserve, proximity to failure, and hypertrophy. But this study collated all of the results from the other studies and put them into 3 groups. Group 1 was everyone conducting their sets to 3 reps in reserve. Group 2 was everyone completing their sets to 1 rep in reserve, and Group 3 was momentary muscular failure. Or in simple terms, you can't do any more reps. Right, so before I tell you, I want you guys to guess in the comments which group you think got the most gains. And the answer was actually none of them. So there were no significant differences in hypertrophy across all of the 3 groups, which probably means you don't need to train to failure to maximise your hypertrophic gains. All it might do is increase your long-term fatigue, which won't be ideal for recovering in time for your next session. Okay, so let's round up what we know based on these 5 studies. So we know that you should be changing your bicep exercises between every 1 and 2 months. You should be completing at least 12 sets per week for your biceps. So like I said before, if you're training your biceps twice a week, that means you need to be doing at least 6 working sets per session. You should be focusing on exercises that elicit a deep stretch like seated incline curls, but complete the full range of motion on whatever bicep variation you're doing. And you should be completing your set at minimum 3 reps in reserve. If you want to go to failure and you think you can cope with the fatigue, then do that. But at most, 3 reps left in the tank, no more than that.
Right, so let's put this workout to the test because, as I always say, the best workout is one you'll stick to. So if this workout doesn't feel good, I probably won't keep doing it. But if it does feel good, and I know it's scientifically proven to enhance your hypertrophy, then why wouldn't I do it? So let's give it a try. Following on from what we learned in this video, I'm going to do 2 bicep exercises where my shoulder is in a state of extension, 2 neutral bicep curls, and then 1 bicep curl where my shoulder is in a state of flexion. And I'm going to conduct this workout assuming I would do this workout twice a week, meaning I'll do at least 6 working sets for this session. I'll also be paying attention to the bottom portion of the range of motion, but not neglecting the upper portion. And as I said before, I'll be taking every set to at least 3 reps in reserve, but most of the sets I'll take to momentary muscular failure. So applying these scientific principles will allow you to get the most out of your bicep training. Well, that's it for today. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more science-based workout tips like this. If you want to see a science-based bicep workout in action, click the card in the top right corner and it will take you straight to it. But as always, thanks for watching and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.